Welcome back to the basketball show. I have never played a Carly Rae Jepsen song before, but as listeners may know, our son Ben passed away a year and a half ago, and Ben was heavily involved, and we play a lot of his music on the show. Very involved in the punk rock world, but for whatever reason, Ben loved Carly Rae Jepsen's song. So it's nice always to remember Ben and to play songs that he loved, and this particular song was atypical for him. But we are pleased to be joined now by Pat Boylen, who's been with us many times before. And Pat, I thank you so much for making time to join us today.
It's always good to be with you guys. Appreciate you having me.
So, Pat, let's dive right into the Pacers season. Sum up what your feelings are about how this Pacers team has come together during the 24-25 season.
Well, it's been really interesting because I think if you told me the Pacers would have a 31-23 record at this point at the beginning of the season, I would have, given a soft thumbs up, maybe a B plus type of grade. But the way the season has unfolded has been kind of on the extremes. They started the year just 10-15. I want to say they were in 10th place at that point. And, coming off an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, when you start 10-15 and don't have injuries to your two All-Stars, that jumps out as a little alarming. And it's kind of felt like the first 25 games, nothing could go right. The next 25 games, nothing could go wrong. The Pacers were then 19-6 over the next 25. They had the best record in the league over that time. So they went from something like the 20th best team in the league in their first 25 to the best record in the league over their last 25. And now we're 54 games in, so it's kind of felt like they've settled in between those two extremes, which how could you not? It would be hard to be better than that or worse than the beginning portion. But they're in a great spot. I mean, they're in fourth right now. Granted, Milwaukee's nipping at their heels, but I think if you would have asked anybody around here if you'd have the opportunity at game 54 in the season with only 28 to go, the opportunity to be in a spot to have a home court advantage spot in the first round of the playoffs, I think anybody would have taken that. Because even though the Pacers did go to the conference finals last year, they did so out of the 6th seed, and they never had home court advantage at one point in the playoffs. And that obviously can go a long way if you can get it, and a long way to go until that potentially is the case. But from a standings perspective, I think they have to be thrilled with where they are.
Pat, it's interesting as I'm listening to you describe it, the feeling on the outside looking in from afar has been that it has been a weird, windy road for the Pacers, but they have been very good. What do you think, if you had to come up with one or two reasons why after a 10-15 start, the team started to galvanize and turn the season around in a very dramatic fashion? What were the key factors and why that happened?
Well, I'll give you two players that really stand out to me, and one of them is Tyrese Halliburton. Now, fortunately for the Pacers, and I'll knock on wood here as I say this, he's been healthy for nearly the entirety of the year, so it wasn't like they didn't have him and got him back. But if you look at Halliburton's first 25 games or so, he was not playing anywhere near the all-star caliber that he was last year. And he really then, over the next couple of months, turned it on. We saw the player that, helped lead the Pacers to the conference finals, the one that started the All-Star game. And sometimes basketball, especially in the NBA, is really, really simple. It's how's your best player playing? And for the Pacers, that went a long way. But I think the other guy that maybe is a less household name that really made a massive difference, and I think he's starting to become one a little bit, shares the backcourt with Halliburton and Andrew Nembhard, and a Canadian, and somebody that he's never going to be, probably at least, the 25-point, 10-assist guy, although he's certainly capable of that from an assist perspective. But he is just, I'll tell you, of the guys that we've had in my 11 years here, it's a very, very short list of guys that I enjoy watching play more than Andrew Nembhard. He is tough as a bulldog, tough as nails, a gritty defender, is up in your face, but he does it in a way like he's the opposite of a Patrick Beverley type who's really flamboyant and bombastic. I mean, the guy just just gets down in the stance, defends hard, never gets too high, never gets too low. Offensively, he's a solid shooter. He's a solid passer, and just does everything you would want a player to do. And he's becoming the team's lockdown defender on the perimeter. And in just their last game against John Morant, Morant had a very pedestrian night, 4 of 15 from the floor, and the Pacers beat the Grizzlies. And I thought maybe the biggest reason why was Andrew Nembhard. Now, you look at the box score, and his stats don't jump out at you, but what he does to frustrate and disrupt opposing guards is significant. And the Pacers, in that conference finals run, they went against Damian Lillard, they went against Jalen Brunson, and those guys had good series, don't get me wrong, but I think Nembhard was able to frustrate them just enough to give the Pacers a chance to pull out the win. And if you look at a game log of Andrew Nembhard and the games that he's played in this year, the Pacers' record when they've had him available is extremely good. He missed about a month plus early on in the season, and I think, including myself, who's a huge fan of his, I don't think anybody really realized just how significant the impact of having Nembhard on the floor is and was until the Pacers lost him. And you talk about the turnaround date for this team. It was somewhere between December 8th and December 13th. They had a few days off, and in that time, the season flipped. That is almost exactly when Andrew Nembhard returned to the starting lineup. So if you want to point to one player who the Pacers didn't have when they were struggling and do have now that they played a lot better, it's the Canadian Andrew Nembhard.
It's really interesting to hear you describe the impact that Andrew is having on the Pacers, Pat, because it's one of those things that when you understand, well, sport in general, but basketball specifically, it isn't statistics always that dictate the impact that a player has on your team. The things you don't see in box scores and on score sheets that you bring to a team. You might only have 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists, but it's when the 14 were scored, when the rebounds were gotten, and when the assists were made, coupled with your ability to play consistently defensively against the best player, but make big defensive stops at critical junctures in the game. To hear Andrew is that type of player now is really interesting, because I think when he started at Florida, that wasn't the type of player people felt that Andrew was going to be. So to see him evolve into that, and particularly north of the border, I think people take an awful lot of satisfaction from that.
Look, I'm very biased here because I'm a Pacers employee and the Pacers are my team, and I grew up in Indianapolis. But I'll tell you, I think he's maybe the most underrated player in the league, because when you hear about difference-making NBA players, look, you, of course, go through the all-stars and the superstars in this league, and I'm not trying to suggest that he's at that level. Maybe he can get there. But he's just – everything that he does impacts winning. And as you say, that's not always – things that jump out statistically. Although I will say, when the Pacers made the run that they did last year, Tyrese Halliburton got hurt in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, did not play the rest of the way. The Pacers got swept in the Eastern Conference Finals, but all 4 of those games were right down to the final couple of possessions. And if you look how Nembhard played when he had the sole point guard reigns, he was statistically very good. So I think he can be that guy that puts up significant statistical numbers, but it's just what he brings impacts winning in every form and fashion possible. And not only is he a good on-ball defender, but because of the way he plays defense, he's able to cover up for, perhaps other deficiencies. Look, Tyrese Halliburton is one of the best point guards in the league, maybe the best passer in the world, but he's not a great defender. And so being able to have Nembhard in the backcourt with Halliburton, I think helps make up for some of what Tyrese lacks on the defensive end. Look, top to bottom from a skill standpoint, is Nembhard the best guy on this roster? No. But he might be the guy that has the ability to swing the team from a perspective of being disappointing or a little bit underwhelming to be one that's a contender. And you went through that list. I agree with it. And the other thing I would add is, are you ready to make the big play in the big moments? And the biggest shot that I would say that the Pacers have had, or the biggest individual moment, single play I'm racking my brain. I mean, I'm sure there was one in the early 2000s or maybe the early 2010s runs that those Pacers teams made. But down 0-2 in the second round of the playoffs, the Pacers and Knicks were tied really late in game number 3. And if the Knicks win it, the series is 3-0 New York. The series is over. And Nembhard hit a 35-footer
I remember.
Late in that game that gave the Pacers the win. And then ultimately the Pacers ended up taking the series. So I would argue he's hit the biggest shot in, at least 12, 13 years. I mean, you'd probably have to go back to the early 2010s Pacers at minimum. And, he's just such a cool, calm, collected type of guy. Like, the moment is never too big for him. And it's been really interesting to see him develop and the impact that he's had on the Pacers.
I'm talking with Pat Boylen, the radio voice of the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever, here on the Basketball Show on Sports 1440. Pat, jumping to the Eastern Conference, it's been an interesting year with I think no one in the world would have predicted the kind of season the Cleveland Cavaliers have started out with through the first 55 games of the year. But the Eastern Conference, with the defending NBA champs Boston Celtics, with a with a very good New York Knicks team adding Karl Anthony Towns, the play of the Pacers, the Bucks, as you said, nipping at your heels. The top 5 in the East, it's no longer the West-dominated league that it once was. The top 5 teams, you've got a Bucks team that's won an NBA championship with perennial MVP candidate and MVP winner in Giannis Antetokounmpo. Celtics, like I said, NBA champs, and then the Cavs. Talk about the evolution of great teams in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I think when you look at the East versus the West, I think I would certainly say the West is better, but I would say the West is better because the West is deeper. That 1 through 5 that you look at the East, I think stacks up easily as well as the 1 through 5 out West. It's when if you do the 6 through 10
Correct.
Type of look, that's still a bunch of pretty good teams out West. And that's where it maybe starts to drop off a little bit in the East. And I don't mean that to put down Detroit, who, maybe they're in for a really exciting finish here. They've been a very, very impressive team. But, this is a team that's been drafting in the top 5 for a long time. So they're probably in believe it when you see it mode. Orlando's been puzzling. I think they probably should be part of that top 5, top 6 picture. They've had a lot of injuries this year, but they've really played poorly over the last month or so when they've had their guys back. So that's been a little bit of a tough one to figure out. The West has the depth, but when you look at 1 through 5 in each conference, I agree. I think that both are pretty similar there. And look, Cleveland, I did not see this coming, but what I did think was very possible was I think J.B. Bickerstaff is a good coach, and he's showing that in Detroit. But I thought that they were kind of misused in the last couple of years. And they've got Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland and 2 dynamic quick guards, and yet the Cavs were always bottom of the league in pace. And this is a team that needed to play, frankly, like they are now, and use Mobley and the athleticism and running up and down the floor and take advantage of the athletes that you have. And so I think you're seeing from Cleveland a byproduct of, one, health. They were really banged up last year, and they've been healthy for the most part this year, but also just playing the style that fits those guys. And again, it's we'll believe it when we see it in terms of the playoffs. I still tend to think that Boston, when you look at these teams around the top 5 in the Eastern Conference, Milwaukee has won a championship with Giannis, but they have not shown in the last couple of years that they're capable of playing at that level. But when you have Giannis, I think it's always a possibility. I still think Boston comes in as the favorite until somebody shows that they can knock them off 4 times in 7 games. But you can't do what Cleveland's doing and not be a really, really good team and not be a team that's capable of getting to the finals yourself. So I think both of those are possible. The Knicks, I'm still personally, they're very clearly quite good. I'm still trying to figure out how good they are, if they're title contenders or not. Sometimes they look the part, and then sometimes, they're struggling defensively, which is not really a Tom Thibodeau typical trait. They've been good offensively. Those trades in the offseason were so interesting because they brought in Bridges and then maybe had the best defensive team in the league, then traded DiVincenzo for Towns, which sacrificed some defense and added some offense. And for them, the key too, and this is obviously true with most teams, can they stay healthy? But when you've got a coach that's going to play your starters between 36 and 42 minutes per game, I think that becomes an even bigger question for them. So I think it makes the East pretty fascinating. I think right now, there are probably 5, maybe even 6 teams you could see, potentially contending. But I think Boston is still top dog until proven otherwise. Cleveland, in my opinion, has the best chance of knocking them off. But look, as we've seen in previous years, and the Pacers are a great example, you never know until you play the games. And as long as you've got a star or two on your team, you get hot at the right time and anything can happen.
It's so well summarized, Pat, and I totally agree with you about the Knicks. Tom Thibodeau, on one hand, he has impressed me in his adaptability on the offensive side of the game in loosening up his style of play. But his minutes, the way he works his top 7 in minutes played, just as a recipe for disaster over an 82-game regular season and into the playoffs. So that does remain to be seen with a guy like Cat, who is injury-prone anyway at the best of times. And he's had, by far, it looks like, his best season overall, certainly rebounding the basketball and scoring. But I agree with you that the big dog is the winner. The guy who has the trophy hanging in his trophy case, that's the Boston Celtics. Somebody has to beat them and prove differently. They've been up and down this year. That's very typical of championship teams, though. Everybody's gunning for you. Everybody brings their best when they have a chance to play you. It's weathering the storm, staying sharp, staying good. And Boston's, every game they go into, you expect them to play well, even when they don't. So until somebody says differently, they have to be the favorite. But there are some teams now, Pacers being one of them, that if they're ready, healthy, going into the playoffs, injuries play such a factor in this that it really is going to be an exciting playoffs when that gets around. I real quickly, I would be remiss. I've got 2 things I have to touch on with you. First of all, quick summary of what you thought of the trade flurry, sending Luka to the Lakers and Butler to the Warriors. What was your week like? What in your thoughts? You've been around the game your whole life. What was your thought? Did you wake up and think, "Holy smokes, this is just like another planet," or how did it affect you?
Yeah, I think the Butler. Well, just to get the Butler trade out of the way, that's been. I think writing has been on the wall somewhere along the lines of the last couple of months. So that honestly made a lot of sense because you got a Warriors team that's desperate to at least try to get back to contention at the end of Steph Curry's run here. It's a risky move, but at this point, they don't have the ability to, sit back and beggars can't be choosers in that regard. So I think it's a decent risk-reward type scenario for them. It might not work, but they probably weren't going to get where they need to go without trying to make a splash anyway. And there's only so many of those type of players that you can bring in at the trade deadline. So we'll see what happens there. I think I, like the rest of the continent, the world was just stunned at the Luka deal. I was actually half asleep and I saw it. I have Shams notifications that buzz my phone, like I think many people do, and I was so convinced he was hacked. And I was even in a group chat that he then followed it up for those that were following on the Shams tweets when it happened. He then followed it up saying, "This is real. This trade is happening." And I still remember telling somebody, well, if you hacked Shams' account, wouldn't you then send a follow-up tweet saying that this is real to try to convince people he hadn't hacked it? So, I mean, look, Anthony Davis is a very good player. It's possible that Dallas, is still a contender if they can get him healthy. But to me, the thing that just makes no sense is you're giving up, maybe 10, 12 years of a absolute superstar for a guy that is in the back half of his prime and a guy that just brought you to the NBA Finals. And I get that the frustrations that they may have had with his weight and with his defense, but even if those things are legitimate, even if those frustrations are real, all of those things existed and you went to the NBA Finals last year. So I know I'm not saying anything that maybe hasn't been on this air or that people listening haven't heard. I really don't have a whole lot to add there other than just bewilderment and shock. And it's been interesting to see the Dallas franchise and the Dallas fan base over the last couple of weeks, seemingly kind of reject this en masse. And we'll see. If Dallas could win a championship in the next couple of years, maybe it absolves Nico Harrison here. But I have a feeling that this is going to go down as one of the dark days in that franchise's history. But that's not to say that Luke is perfect and not without flaws and that it'll definitely work in L.A. I don't know. It's just those type of top 5 players come along so infrequently. And when you get one, you never let one go unless absolutely forced to. And so to see them choose to let one go, even a couple weeks later, is just so astonishing.
Well, it really is. And, it's been beaten to death, certainly. But when the dust all settles, first of all, we know life in professional sports is a marathon, not a sprint. So we, like, as you mentioned, if Dallas next year were to win a championship and a healthy Davis led them, then Nico looks like Masai Ujiri did at Toronto when they brought in Kawhi Leonard on the 1-year deal. But you can't help but look at karma and say you can't make this up that Davis, with his injury history, comes in and in a non-contact play is out for a month in the first game. Like, you just can't make that up. So we'll see where this goes to. But, bizarre. And to not get any picks, like that's where I think we all scratch our heads even more to the point where our scalps are bloody because it's like, no picks? 2 players for Luka? That's what you get? Like, you just can't make that up. Final question, Pat, I have to ask. You also are the voice of the Indiana Fever. Caitlin Clark, her, just volcanic impact on women's basketball, her impact on the Fever, her drawing attention to the WNBA, to the NCAA, unlike any other player. And it's interesting to see the post-Caitlin Clark NCAA this year with great players like Juju Watkins, Paige Beckers. It's a shadow of itself last year with Caitlin Clark. But now, the rumors are Caitlin's been in the gym working hard. She's stronger, really putting in the time to get ready for the season. What are your thoughts about the upcoming WNBA season with the Fever?
Yeah, it still feels like we're on cloud 9 here. I was having this conversation with somebody in the organization just a little over 2 years ago. The Fever were coming off a season where they were 5-31. They knew they were going to get the number 1 pick because they had won the lottery by that point, but they didn't even know if Aaliyah Boston was going to come out into the draft, let alone Caitlin Clark, let alone this offseason where they brought in 2 All-Stars and kept Kelsey Mitchell. And it's so impossible to describe, even as somebody that describes things for a living, it's so impossible to describe just the turnaround this franchise has experienced and the high that currently exists. Also brought in, a new head coach who has all sorts of roots tied in Indiana and has all sorts of success and is one of the best coaches in the world in Stephanie White. I mean, the turnaround is just, it's stunning. And a turnaround doesn't even seem like the right way to put it because not only have things turned around, but where this franchise is at a level that in some ways, I'm not saying from a success standpoint yet, they will hopefully get there. There have been better WNBA teams on the floor, but in terms of selling out a 17-plus thousand seat arena nearly every single night during the regular season, going downtown on a Saturday in July and seeing it flooded with Red Fever gear, and yes, most of them Caitlin Clark shirts and jerseys. I mean, it's just so hard in a good way to wrap your head around. And now the Fever have gone in a position where a little over 2 years ago, they were 5-31, kind of felt listless, just hoping to get Aaliyah Boston. And they've gone from that to having 5 All-Stars on the floor, being the center of women's basketball and a lot of the sports world right now, and certainly will be when the season comes up. And now what comes with that are expectations. For the first time, this franchise in a long time is expected to really start winning at a high level. And Clark has dealt with those expectations for a long time, But I think this will be a little bit different, not necessarily harder. It'll just be different. She's still such a young player in this league. And now for the Fever to really contend for a title, she's going to have to go blow for blow with the Brianna Stewarts and the Asia Wilsons of the world, the established superstars. And I think that'll be the key to the Fever season. But, look, we have just been so fortunate to have her fall into our orbit here. And it's just been so gratifying to have be on this ride and have a small role in all of it. And I can't wait for the season to come around, and hopefully I can jump back on with you guys when that happens and talk about this a little bit more at length.
Oh, we will. Believe me, we will. And Pat, I mean, yeah, talk about a major turnaround. That's of epic proportions. So exciting for not just the Fever, but for the league in general, just what's coming up. So Pat Boylen, voice of the Indiana Pacers, voice of the Indiana Fever. Thanks for spending this extra time. We went to overtime today, but it was just so good. I couldn't go to commercial. We'll make it up. We'll make it up on the back end. But Pat, thanks so much for spending the time this morning.
Hey, appreciate the conversation very much.
Pat Boylen, Indiana Fever, Indiana Pacers, here on the Basketball Show. That was a deep dive, Ryan. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we'll talk about where we're at with our poll, and then we'll dive into some of the other hot topics in the sport of basketball right after these messages on Sports 1440. Welcome back, the Turtles. I had to run out of the studio to go to the washroom. And I said, Ryan, you pick the next song. And I'm expecting Drake or something like that. And I come back and I have the Turtles from the era, 1967, the era when band names being named after animals was cool because you had the Beatles, you had the Monkees, and you had the Turtles. And the Turtles, I have to say, that being one of them, was one of the great songs from that era. So good on you, young man.
Yeah, actually, I feel like a lot of people my age listen to music back in the day, but when I come to the studio, I know to only play music from before I was born. I know that's the rule.
Yeah, but that's most of music that's created. I mean
that is true. Yeah, I guess there's only 23 years of music in my life.
But it's incredible. I mean, that's a great song, and it's been used in different movies. And there's a timelessness to great songs, because when people wax philosophic and remember the good old days when music was so much better, there was so much bad music then. Certainly, though, we went through the iconic development of rock and roll back in the day, evolving into all the different genres that came out of it. But great choice. Let's update everybody on the poll.
Yeah, so on Twitter, we're asking what the best format for the All-Star game was. We talked about it being either East versus West. That poll result has 16% of the vote right now. We have keep the three-team format. Not a single person has voted for that.
Yes.
It's not like there's 5 voters either. Like, nobody likes the three-team format. Four Nations type format is 59.1% of the vote. Mm-hmm. So that's the leader so far. And then the 16-team, your favorite, the 16-team Emirates style, 22.7%. And I wish I could throw in my college alumni idea, or not mine, the other guys, but
Big John.
Yeah, no, football, but still.
Yeah, but it's a great idea. And I think what it shows, though, is you got to do something else. Like this is interesting, because what you dealt with, what we were given by 2 different professional sports leagues were 2 new ways to approach the All-Star weekend. One worked and one bombed big time. And I think that because of the just overwhelming success, I touched on the historic numbers for watching NHL hockey, an NHL hockey event down in the United States. The NBA is paying attention. Again, with the criticism that the league is facing with dwindling viewership overall, that you are seeing viewership down considerably. By the way, second period just ended. Oilers-Flyers coming back after the All-Star break, with the Oilers down 5-3 after 2 periods. So after the basketball show, you're going to want to turn on your TV and watch the third period of this game as the Oilers come out of the All-Star break. Let's go back to something we touched on in the first. And by the way, Ryan, that segment with Pat Boylen was phenomenal. Like the breakdown Indiana Pacers, north of the border, of course, Indiana isn't Boston. It's not the Lakers. It's not the Golden State Warriors in terms of superstar notoriety. But the fact that that Pat paid such tribute to the importance of Canadian Andrew Nembhard to that team, I thought was really good, and especially the way he broke down how his contribution goes way beyond just points, while still pointing to the fact that he's a gamer. When the going is at its toughest, you can look for Nembhard to make a big play, to knock down big shots. I thought it was an outstanding conversation.
You can tell why he gets paid to talk about basketball.
Oh, you sure can. Like, the guy's just fantastic. And so, it's really gratifying. Here we are up in Edmonton. Hockey, the home of hockey, one of the hallmarks, bedrocks of our sports.
That was established on Thursday night.
Reestablished.
No offense to your American.
Hey, no. As people who know me know, I'm from the United States, and I was 50-50 when I was watching the game, and I just wanted Connor McDavid to win it for Canada if Canada were to win. But the American team, despite Donald Trump's musings, the American team was not a hard team to like. They work extremely hard. They were very good. The game itself was so impressive to watch. And one of the things I love about hockey is it's forced intensity because of the nature of the game, but the skill and the ability of the athletes playing hockey, it really is something to watch. But do I still love basketball more? Absolutely. Do I appreciate hockey more and more? All the time. And but anyway, going back to the idea on basketball, for us, north of the border in the western part of Canada, in hockey, a hockey hotbed, to have Pat, have Ben Golliver, have people, high-level people involved in the NBA spend half an hour with us talking about the NBA, talking about the sport of basketball is really great, and I'm so glad we can bring that kind of guest to our listeners. Let's go back to something we touched on in the first segment. And one of our listeners, I believe, texted in that Cooper Flagg might return to Duke in the future. Ryan, what's your take on whether or not Cooper Flagg might do that?
Johnny B. said that. He said he might return to Duke, and I did see that report as well. However, I think there's multiple factors that contribute to him going to the draft this year. One, if the Spurs have a top-end pick, I feel like it'll be hard for him to say no to go into the draft and the potential to play with that kind of team. And the other thing is the money, right? Like, he's making obviously fairly good money, I imagine, with new college rules. He's probably making $1 million or $2 million a year. But starting that entry-level contract, getting it running on the clock is so important when you think about the long-term play for a Supermax contract and the big contracts. If you want your entry-level contract to end as soon as you can, essentially, when you're a superstar, right? Because you can jump to the big money right away. If he doesn't do it this year, it pushes it forward another year. And again, that money is life-changing, right? So for Cooper Flagg, I'm sure he's fine financially, as I said, with Duke, but I just don't see a world where he goes back to Duke next year.
These are musings, and I think with Cooper Flagg musing that he may go back to Duke because he's enjoying the experience so much. Bearing in mind, this guy is 18 years old. I can see why he would ponder it. I can see why he'd think about it, because the money won't be $1 million or $2 million if he stays at Duke next year. It'll be 10 to 20 million that he'll make next year. Like I've heard, and this is a couple of months ago, I heard the top ranked kid, and I don't know the kid's name, in the United States, going to Division I next year, is going to go to Brigham Young University.
His name's AJ something.
Yeah, they're going to pay him $7 million to go to BYU.
Yeah, BYU.
BYU. So if somebody's going to dig into their checkbook and pay $7 million to go to BYU, what are you going to pay Cooper Flagg to stay at Duke? Yeah. What alumnus?
He's getting a $5 million base salary.
Yeah,
AJ is.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's crazy. He's playing college.
He's born in like 2007.
Oh, I know. He's barely out of junior high. I mean, like, so now you've got Cooper Flagg, like, a young guy having a great time, not having to play 82 games. everything you said is valid and will most likely win out. But if he can go back to college and make 10 to 15 million bucks next year, who knows? There was even talk of Caitlin Clark going back to the NCAA. Can you imagine her in the NCAA this year?
Millions. She might make more in the NCAA than like her entry-level contract by a decent margin, no? Outside of sponsorships, obviously.
Well, yeah, but certainly, I mean, the entry-level contract in the
it's
WNBA,
like $80K, isn't it?
Yeah, it's $76,000.
Yeah.
But Caitlin's making many mucho millions, and I think that's it, deservedly so. But I think, Cooper Flagg musing about that, I think it's fun. I think it's really fun to have a young guy say, you know what, playing college basketball is great. I think I might want to do it for another year because I'm going to be playing professionally the rest of your life. And of course, the go-to, understandably, is, the max contract, the timing, like you pointed out, Ryan, the injury, the X factor of injury. He tears his knee up next year, he's done.
Remember Harry Giles? Remember Harry Giles?
Absolutely.
He tore his everything. He went 20th overall and was never able to do anything for the Kings.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no guarantees. Wemby is out now with blood clot. You don't know what you don't know, and the injury bug is the X factor at all times that determines the fate not just of individual athletes, but of teams, of dynasties. Boston Celtics draft Len Bias. Len Bias was every bit as good as Michael Jordan coming out of college. Every bit as good. Only he was a bigger, skilled player. He was 6'9", could shoot it, put it on the floor, block shots, unreal athlete, makes a bad decision one night using drugs and dies. You just don't know it. I mean, that's a very dramatic, dark example. But you just don't know what you don't know. It's always an X factor. So I think odds are we'll see Cooper Flagg in an NBA uniform next year, unless it's, of course, Washington. Then I might go back to Duke if I were him too. But having said that, I think we're going to see him in the NBA. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back with our final segment here on this beautiful Saturday morning on the Basketball Show on Sports 1440. Welcome back to the Basketball Show, our final segment today. Paul Sir, Ryan Reed joining you. I was really pleased to hear the feedback from our listeners about the suggestions on the All-Star Game format. It's going to be interesting, but that's way down the list of what I think are now going to be the interesting topics we're going to be talking about as we head down the stretch run of the NBA season. LeBron James the other night, second 40-point game in not too long a period of time. Ryan, you and I were talking off the air. Jordan had 43 when he went back to Washington. But it looks like we're pretty certain that LeBron's the first
to do it twice.
Yeah,
he did it twice, and MJ did it once after the age of 40. People sometimes might think that, but Kobe Bryant have 16 his last game. He wasn't 40 yet.
He wasn't 40 years old. Yeah, he did have an ugly. That's about the ugliest 60 points you'll ever see.
You know what? It's 60 though, and it's Kobe, so it's like, why not? I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, in your last game,
against the Jazz.
Against the Jazz, if there's ever a guy you would have expected.
Every LA celebrity was in that building. I remember. I think I was in grade 8, and I remember watching it with my buddies. And
yeah, special. I mean, Kobe went out in a blaze of glory as he played in a blaze of glory. He was a phenomenal player, and to go out on a 60-point performance, you've got to have a will of steel for that. But LeBron, he continues to just impress with the way he looks out there playing. I mean, he's definitely lost a step on defense. He's not the same player on offense, but that's what impresses me about it. It's just like with Jordan. What impressed me about Jordan was how he modified his game to become even better as he went into his 30s. He wasn't the high flyer he was in his 20s, but he developed that low post game, the fadeaway shot, the mid-range game, the versatility. LeBron's done a lot of the same things. And so to do 40 games, to do two 40-point games within a month at age 40 is really quite remarkable.
I had a question for you about LeBron, and you've actually obviously watched basketball for a long time. I was curious what you think the best form of a basketball player is. LeBron with the Lakers, LeBron with the Cavs, LeBron with the Heat, Michael Jordan with the Bulls, or Kareem with the Lakers or Kareem with the Bucks?
Ooh, great question.
Top 2 or 3 maybe.
I'd go number 1 Jordan with the Bulls because 6 for 6 in championships, and if he hadn't decided to be a baseball player for a couple of
Might
years.
have 8.
He would, yeah.
I think would you argue eventually probably would have lost 1?
He could have, but you know, and I mean,
He would have added a couple.
But he could have added another 1 or 2 or 3 even. So he retired in a lot of ways. He retired too young. You know, when he came back with Washington, unfortunately at that time, the way he trained and came back, that was the era where bulking up was the big thing. So
well, he got 41 game as we just touched on. So
he wasn't the player he used to be, and he was, instead of playing at 210 or 215, he played at 240. But he was still a very good basketball player. Just wasn't the player he was. But I would go Jordan first. It's always hard. LeBron is the same to me in L.A., Miami, and Cleveland because he's the same basketball. He's been the same basketball player through his entire career. On offense, he makes the right play. Like, that's what I think makes LeBron so great, is his willingness to make the right play at the right time. Willingness to share the ball, his passing ability, his vision, his ball handling skills are just unbelievable. Almost Magic Johnson-like, not with the flair Magic had, not with the dynamism that Magic possessed, but Magic didn't have LeBron's offensive game either. Kareem's interesting because he definitely deserves to be in the conversation, and kudos to you for including Kareem, because you could easily have used Bird or Magic in that situation.
I think it's tier 1's clear. I think it's LeBron, MJ, and Kareem. That's tier 1.
Bill Russell.
No? You think Bill Russell's tier 1? Okay.
Bill Russell's above tier 1.
So actually, I'll throw that in there. Celtics, Bill Russell,
then you have to go Bill Russell because he won 11 of 13.
Okay.
And Russell didn't have the statistics. But similar to the conversation we had,
wins, right?
It's similar to Pat Boylen's conversation about Andrew Nembhard's impact. Bill Russell impacted the Celtics in that era similarly, where he would average obscene amounts of rebounds in a very different league in a very different era. But blocking shots, starting the outlet, running the court, his athleticism, doing all the little things, and then just his ferocious competitiveness.
Also inspired a nation, right? Like, he inspired everybody. And Bill Russell was a mountain of a man in facing the racism that he had to encounter and deal with in Boston, but just in life in general. And Bill Russell was one of the great advocates for the black population in the United States in that era. In sport in general. Like, he was a mountain of a man. So put Russell in there, but I'd rank it Russell, and I'm just going on wins here. Russell, Jordan, kind of a tie between LeBron and Kareem. Would you pick Bucks or Lakers Kareem to represent? If you were to pick, like, his best form.
Oh, Bucks.
Bucks, okay.
He was unreal with the Bucks. Like, he was
71 championship, right? They won in 71?
Yeah, 71, that championship team with Oscar Robertson, but got to the finals again in 74. And just his numbers were ridiculous then. Like, he was so dominant in his youth in the NBA.
When did he switch to Kareem? If he was Lou Alcindor, did he switch right away in the NBA, or was it a couple of years in? Do you remember?
I think a couple of years in, 1 or 2 years in. It wasn't long after he was in the NBA, though. I mean, Kareem, again, social advocate, very
Still
outspoken.
Is.
Oh, yeah, very much. Very much. I won't share the story now, but I've got a great Kareem story. I'll share it another time about when he was in Edmonton. And let's just say it was, I don't think he'll be invited back anytime soon to speak at any function here, because Kareem had a bad night the night he was in Edmonton. Before we have to take off, I want to just touch on to build on something we started to talk about with Pat, and that's the impact of trades on franchises. Last night we got to see the Miami Heat play against the Toronto Raptors, and Andrew Wiggins, based out of Toronto, Brampton, I believe, but playing, most recently started with the Timberwolves, went to the Warriors. Now he's with Miami in the trade that brought Jimmy Butler to the Warriors. Wiggins looked good. He fit in well.
Won his first ever game in Toronto.
Wow.
Which is kind of a crazy stat. Seven different games over 11 seasons in Toronto, and he's Canadian, as you mentioned, and he's never won until last night.
And he played well. And the Heat looked good. Like, the Heat are solid.
He's found his role. He was never, like, when he was picked number 1 overall by Cleveland and then traded, he was supposed to be, like, the guy. They called him Maple Jordan, I think. Was an awesome nickname.
It was a great.
He's never going to be the number 1 guy, but he's an incredible complementary piece, as you saw with the Warriors when they won.
100%. And he was an all-star that year as a complementary player, to your point. So that was good to see. Raptors were underwhelming. Again, you see the gaps. Like, Quickly is good. He's a nice addition. RJ had 29, but I wasn't nuts about the 29. They were awkward. It was an awkward 29, and that's.
Do you think RJ eventually kind of goes into the Wiggins role on a winning team? Like, do you see the similarities besides them both being Canadian?
Well, no. Actually,
or do you think RJ can be better than Wiggins?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think the problem with RJ that he has to confront is he can get 29, but it's not a free-flowing 29. And I'm not taking anything away from him. He's really good, and he's having a really good year in a lot of ways. But there's players that can get 29, and you afterwards you go, I thought he had 15. It was you look and go, how many did he have? Because he took a lot of shots, and he took shots at awkward times. That's partially, but he's trying hard to make the Raptors better.
They call those guys Christmas shooting guys because they're always 12 for 25.
12 for, I know. You match up your numbers, your final scoring numbers with how many shot attempts that you have. But the Raptors are a work in progress. Without Pirtle in the lineup, they're still a ways away. And of course, are we ever going to see Ingram? Are we ever going to see this guy? I sure hope so.
Do you think they just shelf him to kind of tank and then come back next year with a good pick and the full roster of guys?
I guess it depends on whether
they locked Brandon in. They don't have to worry about him leaving. Right?
Yeah, they locked him in. So that might be the smart thing to do. Make that play. Maybe the Raptors get into the Cooper Flag.
I saw a thing where they traded for Kyle Lowry when DeMar was 23 and Kyle Lowry was 26. Brandon Ingram's 27, and they traded for him when Scotty Barnes was 23. So maybe a little bit of parallels there.
Good Lord, you've got all these conspiracy theories all over the place right here. Coincidences.
Coincidence, I think not.
I hope so. And I hope Ingram plays in a Raptors uniform because they gave up a lot to get him, and they're paying him a lot to hold him.
$40 million a year for the next 3 years, I think, right?
Good Lord.
It's Emmanuel Quickly money.
Emmanuel Quickly money. But you know what? If they get him and everybody and Pirtle stays healthy, I think the Raptors could evolve into a competitive team. There's still a piece or two away, and going back to your comment on RJ, here's the difference between RJ and Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins is a really good defender. RJ's an average defender. And
do you think RJ has upside to become a good defender, or do you think he's kind of that's it for his career? He's just an average defender.
I don't think he's physically that kind of guy. I mean, Wiggins has the flexibility and the fast twitch ability. RJ's more of a horizontal player, even though, RJ gets up, he's a great athlete. And he's a great player. Believe me, I'm not ragging on...
that Duke team was one of the fun college teams I've ever watched. Tim Zion and Cam Reddish.
Oh, it was fun. It was fun to watch. Cam Reddish, what a dud. Yeah. What a disastrous NBA career.
He's still going, though. Maybe there's still hope. But he's also in his mid-20s.
Yeah, fair enough.
Hopefully he can turn it around.
You're an eternal optimist. It's always great to have this youthful optimism around these old curmudgeons. Well, thank you very much, Ryan. Great show today. Thanks to everybody for listening today. Catherine, Doug, and Pat, thank you for being on the show with us today. Have a great week on and off the court. Treat each other with kindness. Make sure you tell those that you love them, and we'll look forward to seeing you next weekend.